you and the audience too. So going live in ready, you're live.
Hello and welcome to QuaranCon2022 and the Family in Science Fiction and Fantasy panel. I hope you've enjoyed some of the other panels and readings so far today. But if this is your first session, then an extra big welcome to you right now. If you haven't yet, please check out the con website, which is QuaranCon2022.com, where you can see the schedule for everything else that's coming up over the weekend. And also there's a ton of awesome books on sale on the book sale tab there, including my own books. And you can also find details on the code of conduct there as well. So please give that a read too. So we're here to discuss all things family and found family in science fiction and fantasy. And so I'm Dave Woolliscroft, and I'm going to facilitate the conversation with this awesome group here today. So a little bit about me, and then we'll move on to the more interesting folks. I'm an author of epic fantasy. I write under DP Woolliscroft. My debut series is called The Wildfire Cycle, and the first novel, King's Hold, was a semi-finalist in SFF a few years ago. My books, and King's Hold has this overarching theme of democracy, being introduced to a medieval realm, but actually really it's all about family. There's about sibling relationships, it's about the loss of parents, there's like father issues up the wazoo, and there's found family in there. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. I know we're going to have an awesome chat. So anyway, that's kind of enough about me. Let's meet the amazingly talented group of authors here today. So I'm going to hand it off to each of them in turn alphabetically, if you didn't know that, so you can kind of like be prepared. You can introduce yourself, and then a quick icebreaker is, what is your favorite TV family? So Alicia, would you like to start?
Okay, I'm Alicia Wanstall-Burke. I am the author of the Quenby Sagas, which starts with Blood of Heirs. It was a finalist in SFF 5, I think. The trilogy's finished now. The final book just came out in January. I'm currently in my grandparents' computer dungeon in Victoria, after finally being able to get back to Australia after all the lockdowns and stuff. So it's such a weird panel to be on, like doing a family panel when my entire family, 4 generations of my family, are outside that door. And but when I wrote the sagas, the whole reason that I called it a saga was because I realized that it was a story about family. And the Icelandic sagas and the Norse sagas are family histories. There are alive people today who can trace their families back through those documents. And even though they're full of fictional things, they are a family history. So that's kind of why I gave the series the moniker that it's a saga. My favorite recent family on TV is probably the Winchester brothers from Supernatural, and their whole found family, that they just have this huge extended found family, and they're so dysfunctional, but they're wonderful, and I love them. And that's me.
That's great. Thank you, Alicia. Dee.
Hi, I'm Davinia Evans. My debut novel, Notorious Sorcerer, is coming from Orbit, US and UK in September. It's about a city broken by a legacy of magic and the gutter brat wannabe alchemist who finds that he has to save the world because there's no one else who can do it. It's full of sibling relationships, good, bad, and ugly. There's disreputable older ladies who invite you to call them auntie, and everyone really comes together in a found family, coming together to solve problems sort of way. So I found this an interesting topic to engage with. My favorite TV family is probably the Wells family from Harlots, because I just really like women behaving badly.
Yes, good choice.
That's great. Yes. I love, by the way, the disreputable older ladies. That's kind of one of my favorite things that maybe we'll talk about later too. Great. So Quen, you're up.
Hi, I am Quenby Olson, or Quen. My most recent release is Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons, which is a tale of Miss Mildred Percy, who is in her 40s. She's a spinster. She has completely dedicated her life to her family. She took care of her parents when they were ill, moved in with her sister, and has completely become their nanny. Just her whole life is about her family and giving up herself to them. And then she inherits a dragon egg, and all of a sudden she finds that she can break free of that and find herself and discover that she's no longer just a piece of her family. She is her own person. My favorite TV family, I'm going to go a little more old school and say The Simpsons. Just because it's The Simpsons and that's what I grew up with. So I'm sticking with that. So that's it.
That's great. That's a good choice. Sarina, hello.
Hi, my name is Sarina Dahlan. My debut novel, Reset, was published last year by Blackstone, and it was also selected as one of the Once Upon a Book Club books. Big honor. Its prequel is coming out in November. Why did I say November? May of next year, and its sequel is May of the year after that. So this topic on family is really interesting because in Reset, the characters were created using randomized DNA from the survivors of the last war. So no one's technically related. So all families are found families. So I'm so excited to be talking about, what my meaning of family means. And my favorite TV family is probably the found one on Friends. I grew up with that, and I always thought that their relationships were really interesting. They kind of took care of each other, like as if they are family. So.
Yeah, that's great. Trish, you round us out.
My name is Trish Heinrich. I write paranormal romance under the name Trish Heinrich. And my latest book was actually the completion of my angelic paranormal romance series, which follows the Dearborn siblings. They're all part angel, part human. So they have this angelic side that they can shift into. And they have a very kind of broken family. Their dad was this big superhero in the city, but there was a much darker side to his relationship with his children at home. And so each of them as an adult are kind of dealing with the fallout of that. And as the series goes on, you find out why things were like that and what happened. And the culmination of everything in book 4 is healing and coming to terms with their father's legacy and then who they are, kind of repairing that sibling relationship. My favorite TV family, this is a hard one. Like, I'll be honest, as everybody was talking, I was like, my picks kept changing. But I think I'm going to have to go with the family of origin, blended family, found family of the TV show Eureka. I loved that show. It was on Sci-Fi. It's early 2000s, and it's there were several origin, like family units, like father and daughter, and then there was some blended family aspects of it. But then all the characters as a whole, they really come together and they form this beautiful, strange, just really warm found family, and they're really ride or die for each other. And I love that. Every Christmas I watch the Christmas episode and I cry. So I love that show.
That's great. I don't know that show. I will have to look it up.
Hey, buddy.
I think it's on Amazon.
We have some editors. Hi.
We have a guest appearance.
Adrian. Oh, and my mum.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Say hello to the world.
Yeah. We're gonna keep asking our questions.
Okay.
Okay. Have fun.
Have fun.
Get dirty.
Thank you.
Sure.
Oh God. We're gonna set fire to something.
Good. I wish I was doing that too. Excellent.
Oh dear.
All right, so let's kick stuff off with a little bit more in-depth questions. So I don't know who would like to go first, but maybe we just start with the biggest question that we could probably have, which is like, why do we think families are important in science fiction and fantasy stories? Who'd like to go? I'll pick on somebody. D, you're in my top left. So
okay. I mean, I think families are important. Like connections to other people, between people, are important, and families are one of the closest that we have. But they also serve as a very interesting, I think, world building, culture building element. What is defined as family? What terms are used? How important it is? What families do together, what they don't do together. All of those things really come into to inform who the characters are and what their priorities are, and helps you make a richer, deeper sort of world, because it's about people.
I think as from the origins of the genre, if you look at something classic like Tolkien, you've got characters who are saying, oh, I'm Gimli, son of such and such and such and such, and that heritage, I think, gives the story scope, and we tend to deal in big scope stories in sci-fi and fantasy, and to give it that scope, we need to see the generational legacy of a person. And even if, like, if you look at something like The Expanse, each character's family, whether there is none or, you know, it's just a black hole of we don't know, that even that adds character to that character. Like, why doesn't this person have a family? What happened to them? Why are they like this? Like Amos. So it adds that depth to the story. It makes it feel real.
That's good. By the way, Alicia, I'm currently watching The Expanse. I'm only on season 2, so don't say anything.
That's not a massive spoiler.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I also.
Go ahead.
There's 3 of us. I also think that it's really our earliest relationship is with a family member. I mean, whether that's a parent or a child, or, you know, like a sibling, or depending, like, if how your early years are formed, those are our basis for relationships out in the world. Like, we learn from our family how to function, how to relate to other people, how to trust or not trust other people. And all of us, it's one of those relationships where wherever you go in the world, everybody has some kind of history with a mom or a dad or a cousin, or, you know, it's very, I guess, universal. And so I feel like when it's in a story, we can kind of relate to it, even if we don't have the exact same relationship that's being written about. There's some kind of kernel in there that can strike us and relate us and root us into that world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think family definitely is a shorthand to the character, and the relationship that the characters have with their family members, or sometimes lack thereof, I think can tell us a lot about their drive, their purpose, their moral compass. When I was writing my debut novel, the question was, I mean, this was a world where no one was technically related, and every 4 years their memories are erased in the name of peace. So the question that I had to kind of keep asking myself is, how do you bond knowing that you're not really related to anyone by blood? So no one is technically like obligated to love you. And also, you know, how do you form a bond when you know that you're going to not remember about them in the next 4 years, or after 4 years?
I think what's really interesting too about families, not just in sci-fi and fantasy, but any stories, is that with your family, whether it's found family, your biological family, whatever it is, it's almost like your first language. The people who raised you, you didn't have to learn how to interact with them. It was just something that was there always. And then when you go out into the world and you're faced with new people and new relationships, then suddenly it becomes like learning another language. Well, I behaved like this with my siblings, my parents, my grandparents, etc. And now I go out and it's no longer natural. And so I think that dynamic is always really interesting. I think that's why so many stories, especially fantasy stories, will start with the person having to leave their family and go out into the world, because it's out of their comfort zone. Your family is your comfort zone. Even if the relationships are somewhat toxic, it's comfortable and you know it. Whereas when you go out and you're out in the world and you're going off to battle and you're going off with a dragon or whatever you're doing, then suddenly even just meeting somebody at the local tavern that you've never met before is this new unknown adventure that you have to face.
Yeah, that's really good. I was going to ask you about kind of the absence of family in a bit, but you also just touch on kind of my next question too, Quenby, which is great. So maybe you can kind of carry on. It's like, there's definitely certain tropes sometimes that are used as it comes to family and science fiction and fantasy. What do you think is the most overused one that you see? And still, like, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing either. I wonder, like, what your take on it is.
The evil stepmother.
I forgot that one, actually. I was thinking through in my head.
I'm thinking Star Wars, I'm thinking Aragon, I'm thinking that the trope that I always think of is you're being raised by someone who, is your uncle or someone who's not your parents, because we don't know what happened to your parents. And then that person who's been raising you, who is not your parent, because we don't know who your parent is, spoiler, and they get killed, and their death then thrusts you out into the world with some wise mentor. And I think that's a trope that you see so many times, is I'm being raised by someone who's not my parent, because my parent is out there, or maybe not out there, or maybe they're, and then I have to go discover who my parent is. And I think that's the trope that you see a lot, is that who is my family? Who is really my family? Where did I come from? Are they the villain? That's what you see a lot, I think.
And that one segues into the dead parent.
Yes.
Or the fridged parent, the parent who is fridged to give you that inciting incident to take off. And I think when I started writing Blood of Heirs, I think I made a conscious decision to not have any dead parents, like to not do the Disney, and to have the parents. All my parents in my books are terrible. Like, none of them are nice. There's one mum who's nice. One. And she's not around for, like, she's not in the scene very much. Like, everyone else is just awful. They're awful people. But you find out why they're awful later on. There's a lot of people who write reviews and they're like, I don't know why Leiden's mum's so mean. And I'm like, so neither does Leiden. Because she's 13. She doesn't understand why her mum's mean, but she is. And you don't find out that until much, much later in the series. But yeah, the Disney dead parent is and I don't know if we've inherited that from other stories, like older stories, that is something like from the hero's journey, like the unknown / dead parent. I think we might have inherited that, and it's just come down through pop culture as being something that happens certainly to young characters. Like, you have to have, you're living in your idyllic life, and then your parent is murdered by, I don't know, rampaging orcs or something, and you've got to go off and save the world. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just a common one.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, I was actually like, it's funny, Alicia, that you mentioned fridging, because that was one of the first things that came to my mind, but not just the parent, like the wife, the sister, like insert any female character that's like family. And they're fridged in order to facilitate the male hero's arc. And I think that is something that needs and it really is frustrating that I think the term was coined in the 90s, and we're still having to really push for content creators to really think about fridging. Like I brought it up a couple of years ago in a superhero fiction conversation, and most of the people didn't even know what it was. It was like, what is that? And I was like, are you serious? Like, you read comic books and you don't know what this is?
Yeah, I knew that it happened. I didn't know the term until the Wheel of Time show came out, and everyone was like, what happened to this character? Why was this character put there
just to die? Yeah,
invented to go in the fridge.
And that I'm like, if it had happened in the books, I could understand why you would do that. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What? So
it didn't happen in the books?
No.
Just did it for the TV? Oh.
That character didn't exist. And so I'm trying to avoid spoilers, but that particular character that was fridged in that episode didn't exist. They were created to die.
Yeah. And it left a really bad taste in my mouth. I loved those books. I was looking forward to the show. And when they did that, I was like, well, I don't know if I'm going to like the rest of this.
I enjoyed the show. I've not read the books, but I was that one thing. I'm like, why? Why did you do that?
Yeah.
So,
I was going to say that.
Sorry. You go.
I was going to say that I think, the dead parents trope it's kind of like a manipulation tool, right? That the storyteller is using to make the readers immediately feel sympathy for the main character. And so therefore you can kind of like, oh, now this person's going to be having to fight for everything. And everyone loves the underdog story. So I think it's one of those really overused tropes because it works,
Yeah. Go on, Dee, what were you going to say? What had come to mind?
I was just, I think also the dead parent is, because there's always that question of like, you want to thrust your main character into horrible things and like out of their comfort zone. And there's that question of, but why are their parents allowing this? So it's like, we'll just get rid of them. That question goes away. But it does allow a dramatic change, and you can't stay in the safety of the known environment. You must go forth and you must find out who you are and solve problems. And yes, you are being evicted from your childhood.
Yeah, it forces independence, doesn't it? Like in a way where no one ever just goes off to university and then decides to like go be a hero after 2 years at hero school or something.
But I think it also shows how often we're using younger characters in the genre. Like the younger character is the one who is most commonly with the parent. But then, like Trish was saying, the dead family relative, any relative, the dead brother or, the murdered sister or whatever it is, or the wife. I mean, my most despised trope in action movies is when said hero, wife and child are taken or wife and child are killed and I must go on a revenge rampage. And I'm like, ugh, boring. And I didn't want to watch John Wick because I thought that's what that was.
I was going to say.
And I was like, no, I'm not
dog.
And then I found out it was the dog, and I was like, all right, I'll watch it. Used that trope and went, and it was great. It was great. I loved that. So yeah, the dead parent one, that's for me.
What do you think is, like, in contrast, what's the most underutilized family relationship?
A functional family.
It's a good point. Yeah. It might not be very interesting.
Or supportive step parents.
Yeah,
I've yet to read supportive step parents.
Yeah.
I was thinking the female character as mentor, not just caretaker, because and we've got with Giles and Buffy, like Giles is arguably Buffy's father figure. Veronica Mars, her and her dad, Alias, Sydney Bristow and her dad. Like, there's not many female characters, whether related by blood or in a found family sense, that act as mentor and mother figure at the same time. Most of the time, if they're a mother figure, they're more like the caretaker and the emotional support, which there's nothing wrong with that. But it would be great to see a woman as mentor, not just a woman as maternal figure.
Yeah. Can anyone think of any right now?
I've got one, but she's like about as maternal as a cactus. So, but she tries. Like she's in a really tough spot where she's an outcast within the community, but she's like a companion to Leiden's mother. And so she's kind of seen as like the crazy witch in the hut up on the hill. And she tries to kind of help Leiden understand things that she can't, but she can't actually tell her the truth. So she's trying to mentor this kid without giving her too much information.
Is that one of your books?
Yeah, that's in Blood of Heirs. That's in the series. And she goes all the way through, and we find out more about her. And then she is able to be more of a mentor later on, but she's still definitely seen as someone to be wary of. She's not somebody to be just outright trusted. So there's a bit of a conflict relationship going on there where they're trying to love-hate each other all the time. So yeah, she tries.
I think very often the female mentors do fit that sort of the wariness, the untrustworthy. I'm thinking of Moiraine in Wheel of Time, who sort of is she's the one who's taking them on the adventure. She is Gandalf in this scenario, but she also has her own agenda, and she can't. So it's not the marriage of the maternal and the mentor. It's the mentor, but we can't really trust her like a mother.
Yeah.
And I think you see a lot more of that with female characters to divorce them from the maternal.
Yeah.
Possibly once again, because then there's this question of, but why did they let this happen to these poor, nice young people?
Because women are supposed to be cuddly, right? We're supposed to, we're not supposed to let the kiddies get hurt. But I think seeing that female figure subverted as being not just always being the seductress or the evil threat, like you can cross these things together and they don't need to fit a box.
I think some people point to Sarah Connor in the second Terminator film as a mentor, but she's definitely not a cuddly maternal figure by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
But I don't know if I have trouble saying, yeah, she's a mentor, because she definitely fits the role in terms of like protecting and guiding John. But I don't know. I've always thought there was something a little bit fundamentally lacking in calling her a mentor character. But
yeah,
that's one that you could somewhat argue is a mentor, I suppose.
Yep. I think we had somebody in the chat, Ilya Gimnitz, who said that, Kid Maria said that grandparents would be like something that we don't see very often.
I've got a grandmother figure in the next book that I'm writing, The Smuggler's Daughter, and she is the main caregiver for the main character's child, because the main character has to basically go out and do the work to support. She runs the grandma runs the business from home, and mum's out doing all of the legwork, I guess, and the son is at home with grandma. And but Leiden at one point in book 3 in Empire of Shadows finds out that she has grandparents, and in her tribal community nobody lives that long, but where her other family is from, they do. And she's like, I have grandparents? Like she can't conceptualize that there's a generation above her parents, because nobody has grandparents, because they just don't live that long.
I'd like to see, I think, something that you really don't see in a lot of different kind of novels is happy married couples.
Yeah.
Maybe doing something together. Like not just, okay, we have a troubled marriage and, or my wife is queen and she's conniving and I'm trying to save the kingdom or something, like just maybe a happy couple, husband, wife, however you want to do it, together and working together and happy and working towards the same goal. And I think that's something you really don't see a lot of. You see mentors and things like that. You see 2-3 people working together, but it's very often not, I think, married people.
Yeah. Or one person, they're functional and one person's going off to do the thing and they're leaving
Yes.
the loving wife at home.
Yes. You know, kind of, yes, like, oh, bye, I'll see you and the kids in 3 books, you know. Yeah. You know, it's, I'd like to actually see, you know, I'd like to actually maybe see a fantasy novel where a husband and a wife and other people, that's fine, go off together and fight, whatever they have to do to save the world.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that that's probably would be more common. I see that more in certain types of paranormal romance where there's a happily ever after at the end of every book and it's a family dynamic. You'll see those couples come back. I definitely did that at the end of my series, like all the siblings and their significant others are together and you get to see those dynamics. One of them becomes a parent. And so but I think that might be more like, it's definitely lacking in more of the epic fantasy or space fantasy, you know, like, yeah, you don't see that a whole lot.
I think I really liked the ongoing relationship between Jamie and Claire in Outlander because they go from being, you know, young and nubile to being not so young and nubile, but still having a really lovely relationship that has challenges, obviously. But yeah, continuing to see them function within that. And I know it's a historical fantasy, kind of not fantasy, but yeah, it's nice to see that continuation rather than, bye.
Yeah. No. Yes.
Well, I was just thinking that like both of the things that you mentioned, actually I have it in my book, and I kind of felt that it was just an answer that I had to find for the fact that these people are not really related to each other, that relationships are not you know, it doesn't have this long span of time, but there's a mentor in there because there's no one else telling, you know, the protagonists the answers to the questions that they're trying to find, which is how can we stay together, you know, because they found each other and they want to be able to maintain their love past the 4-year cycle. And and so I think the fact that they aren't really family members guiding you, it was easier for me to write characters who have to step in and do those, you know, things that normally you'd have a mom or a dad or a grandparent to do.
That's cool. One of the things that just to add in that I often like building on what you were saying, Gwen, like from the married couple, but even the family unit. I really love the movie The Incredibles. Like, you know, just because you get to see like that family dynamic at the same time as them all have like being very capable in their own particular ways too.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that would work, but just the kind of family dynamic would be interesting. Anything else to add on that one? Next question. So we touched on it a little bit before when we were, you know, talking about like the kind of the Darth Vader thing, but family members as antagonists. And so it could be like big, bad, evil people, or it could be, you know, maybe where there's family members that are toxic to other kind of main characters. What do you think about that? And
I love it.
Yeah.
It's like, what did you write a book about, Alicia? Well, turns out it was that. That's not what I set out to write, but that's apparently what I wrote. But I think probably my favorite antagonist family member, it was Lord Garmadon in the Lego Ninjago movie. And like he's like butt dialing Lloyd, and he's like, no, my kid was bald with no teeth. And he's like, that was me 16 years ago. And he's like, no, not you. No. Like, just completely disconnected from his kid, and he's just useless as a father. And that whole movie is about like reconnecting as a family, and it's just a funny take on, I guess, the Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader kind of dynamic. But yeah, my characters, all of their parents are their antagonists. You've got Rand literally being chased down by his father's soldiers because he's got magic and magic is illegal. So he quite literally is under threat of execution from his own father. And then you've got Leiden's mother, who wants her to inherit her father's throne, for want of a better word, but won't let her do the things that will kind of qualify her for that role. And because she's a girl, her father desperately wants a son. He's got 10 daughters and no sons. And it's very much a Henry VIII must have a son dynamic. But her mother's like, you know, this is the role that will protect you. If you are not going to inherit his titles, you are going to be married off to someone else, and I can't control that, and you will be unsafe. So there's this whole thing about trying to control her life. And yeah, mum, they're just not very nice people.
That's good to know.
It is explained, but they're not nice. So yeah, I love it.
Did you?
Well,
Okay. Sarina.
I was going to say that I just finished writing a book about a marriage falling apart, and husband and wife ended up being on the opposite side of this issue. And I really enjoy that dynamic because, the passion that goes into a marriage and the understanding of the history and the love, how does that transform when you find yourself no longer seeing eye to eye? And I just found that, that dynamic incredibly interesting, because you're just, like, you look at the person and you're like, I love you, but I hate what you stand for. And then I'm going to do everything I can in order to make it so that whatever you're doing is not going to work out. And but then in a way they just cannot disconnect because they're attached to each other. It makes for a very conflicted, complex story and characters to write. So yeah, antagonists as family, really, really interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah, all that, the history and the familiarity really brings so much depth to a conflict, and just no one knows where your buttons are as well as your family, and they can really push them quite hard.
Yep.
I think some of my favorite stories, and I actually, as I was thinking about this question, I have this in every single one of my books because I have a different pen name that I wrote urban fantasy under. That they're all just very dysfunctional family units. But in every one of them, and also like obviously in the romance series that I just finished, I mean, that's the plot through line of the entire series is finding out, and healing this family that's been broken for so long. I love family as antagonists, but the part of it I love is figuring out, or seeing rather, the progression towards healing, that it's oftentimes even messier than the thing that, than the thing that broke the relationship in the first place. And the stories I love the most are the ones that just full on lean into it. They don't shy away from all of the messiness and the brokenness of that relationship and what it takes to heal that relationship. They don't just slap a Band-Aid on it and call it good. It's so if that's what I like in a family member as an antagonist, is seeing how they're, if they decide to heal it, how it's going to happen.
That's great. Man, you must have something to add here, because I've been reading Miss Percy and like the sister is horrible. So
it gets worse. In Miss Percy, the family members are the antagonists there. I mean, there's one character who's an antagonist, not family, but what was interesting about that was, since it was siblings, and I've always found sibling rivalry to be really interesting, because it shows how much of your personality sometimes is just somehow innate, because you can be raised by the same people in the same household with the same circumstances, and yet you will have one person whose belief system is this, and this person whose belief system is that over there, and they just clash so hard. And I find that such an interesting dynamic to see that, you know, how did you turn out so differently? Why do you clash so much when you should be similar? You would think, oh, you know, nurture versus nature kind of thing. You would think that it would be the same, but no, it's just fight sometimes, no matter what. And so Miss Percy definitely has that dynamic with the older and the younger sister. And then it carries on then with her nieces and everything, the whole family. You see just how they just become these completely different people. They all came from the same household, and yet it's, I'm completely selfish and I'm going to ruin everyone's life. I'm over here and I want to help everyone, and just examining how that can come to be, all coming from the same roof, from the same family.
I think we find that so compelling because it's so real. Like, even if it's not happening in our family immediately, like, we know someone who that's happened to. We know someone whose marriage has failed. We know someone who's parenting children with their partner and it's not working, but they're just fighting through it. Or you've got siblings who are attacking each other, or they're working together really well and they're running a business or something. And that's real. And that even though there's dragons in the sky or spaceships, that's the human element that we can relate to. And that's where we connect to our characters. I think that's what makes them real.
I think when we think of family, there's almost a sense of entitlement attached to it, where we feel like we are entitled love and understanding and support no matter what. And that's not always the case, but it hurts nonetheless when you don't get those things that, you know, you require. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So just for the folks in the audience, we will try to leave the last 10 minutes or so for questions. So start thinking now and feel free to pop them in the chat. And then next question for you all is, we talked about this a little bit earlier too, with people going off to do, you know, go off to war or on some crazy quest. But like, what do you think about family more as a memory? Or a motivation for main characters? That is like, it's that absence of family. Any you know, examples you think of where that's done well, or like what are things that you think that you would do to make that a successful kind of aspect of your character's development?
I've definitely done that more in the final book of the trilogy. There's a lot of discovery of a particular person's past that we haven't seen in the first two books, and it explains a lot that's happened in the first two books, and you start to understand where they've come from and where their family has let them down, and how that's pushed them into a situation where they've made a series of decisions that's completely, like, that's the domino effect of the entire trilogy. But going back to The Expanse, there's later on in the TV series is a character whose family that we don't know about becomes a motivating factor, and that character is probably a character that I don't think I've ever related to a character more than I related to them and that's in the final seasons. But I won't go into it any further. If you've seen it, you know who I'm talking about. But I mean, my characters have got, you know, they're literally being hunted by their parents, one of them. So yeah, he has a lot of, he doesn't know what is going on with his family. So all he remembers is everything being great, and then one day everything falling apart completely and ending up in a dungeon. So yeah, I think that it can be a motivating factor. I think it can hold characters back as well. Like it can limit them, and they can be afraid to do certain things because they might lose a memory, or they might destroy something that means something to them, that they've been carrying with them this whole time.
There is an element of...
I don't know if you've heard that.
We can hear you, Alicia. It's all fine. Don't worry.
Yeah, I just heard my kid like running past outside, and I'm like,
okay, no, you're good. Yeah. Sorry, Dee, you were going to say something.
Yeah, just speculative fiction, the fantasy and sci-fi as stories of change and of going from the person that you were to the person who can do the thing that needs to be done. And so there is an element of leaving behind who you were. So that's sort of your family and becoming the new person, but you get to take stuff with you. Yeah. Sometimes you choose, sometimes you just have to take it with you. So yeah, that element of what you leave behind and what you carry with you, I think is a very interesting one. And that's often where a found family can come in. It's like, that's who I was, and now this is who I choose to be, and the people I choose to build my new life with. Can be really interesting.
Generational trauma and the damage that you carry with you as well, whether you want to or not, whether you're aware of it or not, and realizing that is a, you know, the backpack you're carrying as a character, and using that, whether it motivates you or whether it holds you back. I find that really interesting.
I actually, go ahead, Sarina.
No, go ahead.
We've done this a couple of times.
Our minds are like this.
Your turn. It's your turn. You go first.
I was going to say that in my book, because the people get their memories erased, they literally, you know, are driven by dreams, that, you know, these memories perpetuate themselves into dreams, and they are being led by these dreams that society is telling them are just dreams and not really memories. So yeah, I mean, you can absolutely be driven and have your memory as that center motivation if you feel that you are entitled to, or you own that, you know, that relationship and that memory, and then it's taken away. And I think there's a sense of injustice in that. And I mean, I guess it can be kind of associated with the idea that when you have to travel somewhere and you have to leave behind a family member, there's a sense of kind of, you know, something is missing, there's an injustice, and therefore they kind of immediately become this North Star for you to follow. Yeah, memories, really interesting stuff.
Go on, Trish.
Well, I was just going to say, I play around a little bit with memories in my series in terms of just the oldest son is really the only one that remembers. The dad basically kind of has this psychological break where he goes from this really loving person to being very abusive. And part of it is because like the power that he has is beginning to corrupt him. But it happens when all the siblings are much younger, but the oldest is really the only one that really remembers what dad was like prior to this happening. All the other siblings have these really terrible memories of their dad, and they don't understand why the oldest brother is so committed to him still. You know, why are you, you know, defending him and stuff? And I have this moment with him where he's talking to the person he's falling in love with, and he's like, I am the only one that remembers that he was kind. I'm the only one that remembers the way he would look at our mother, you know, with so much love, and how he would play with us. And then I remember the pain when he became this, and he's like, I hate him, but I love him. And I like the idea of our memories of our families can be very complicated. We can have, and it can influence these incredibly complicated feelings. Like, I remember them being so wonderful, but then they did these horrible things to me, or they acted out in a way that was just, ugh. So how am I supposed to feel about this person? Yeah. And I love exploring those questions that don't really have an easy answer and that might not be answered in a book. And I think that's an interesting way to play with memory and in family relationships as well, is kind of just this complicated, it's not all rainbows and puppy dog ears, you know, like.
Yeah, I think that's great. I love you saying that, because people change too, don't they? I mean, that's why you have memories of them at different times, and sometimes these characters just have memories of them like at that one moment in time, and then they've gone. And meanwhile, people are changing still, kind of in the meantime. They're having to deal with their own shit too. It's like people are going to evolve during that time, and who knows how they'll be different when they actually get back, or they've finished whatever they're going to do too.
Yeah.
So, okay, I don't know if we've got any questions, but I've got another one for you to get started on kind of Q&A. Is there anybody in your families that have influenced a character, or you could see influencing a character, and have you told them, or do they know? So,
Alicia, I'm curious. I'm super curious to have you answer
this. Knowing that everybody's just behind the door listening.
They're not watching this.
From what you told us, I'm like, this should be interesting.
The worst part is that the worst character out of all of my characters is the worst part of me. She's the worst part of me. She's the darkest part of me that I never, ever like. It's just, I don't know. She's just so, this part of me that I just want to keep inside that is never ever going to come out. But I also use all of the kids in my life because I've got, a whole family with all these children, and you need to kind of, accurately portray a 6-year-old. So I'm like, okay, we've got a 6-year-old around here somewhere. And you're looking at how their bodies move and how they talk. And in the next book, The Smuggler's Daughter, there's a 4-year-old boy. And I said to my son recently, I'm like, that there's, I'm writing a book. The next book I'm writing's got like a mum, and, the little boy lives with grandma. And he's like, yeah, it's kind of based on you, but, it's not you, obviously. But, yeah, it's when you're looking at how people interact, you tend to look at your own family and be like, what's the cousin relationship, or what's the grandparent relationship, or how do parents react when you turn around and say, thanks for sending me to private school, but I'm going to go to the army now. Like, it's but yeah, the very worst parts of my characters are the very worst parts of me, if I'm completely honest, which is kind of messed up.
It's good to know, just in case we meet you in person sometime.
It's super cheap therapy. I mean,
yeah, that's really what it was. And I've told people that, they're like, no, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. But it's all of those fears of being a parent and wanting the best of your child, but also not wanting them to kill themselves riding a horse. Like an understanding that, and I remember doing so much research into like the family dynamics of the Tudors, Henry Tudor and his children, and then Queen Victoria and her mother, and the Kensington system, and how her mother, she wasn't allowed to walk down the stairs without holding someone's hand because they were terrified that she would die. She was the only heir after Princess Charlotte died in childbirth. And it was like all the other princes had to go and get married and stop having mistresses and go and have a baby, and a legitimate baby, because someone had to inherit the throne. There was no one left. And it was just like this bubble around this child to get her to adulthood so that she could be a queen. And that was really motivating into how Selin behaves around Lydon. But also, as a parent myself, I was writing this after I'd had Hadrian, and I was like, I can see why she's like this, because you want the best, but you just, you can't protect them every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's terrifying. And that's the horror that is in Selin. That's what's something that's in her is her generational trauma, and she doesn't know how to process it. And it comes out in her parenting, which is awful.
Okay. So we figured out that Alicia writes exclusively about herself. So that's good. What about anybody else? Anybody else have any inspirations?
I mean, jumping off Alicia, I mean, I have children. I have a lot of children, so I've noticed that as why is that? Don't laugh at that. They're all outside the door, sticking their fingers underneath like cat's paws right now. No, I've noticed that as I have gotten older and been a parent for longer, I do notice that I put more children into my stories because, my goodness, I'm surrounded by it. I see how they behave, and it just, it falls onto the pages. Yeah, so I have based characters on people in my life. I will not name any names for any of the evil ones, but I will say that Miss Percy's sister is based on someone in my life. I'm not going to say who, but yes, that was actually a very, very easy character to write in a lot of ways.
Cool.
Because I had that character. Yeah.
Sarina?
I did not write based on anybody in my life.
That's so
I don't want to be sued.
at the front of the book.
That's what I tell people. No, I mean, I find that.
Oh, she really did not want to share then. She killed her internet connection. That's fine.
You're frozen, Sarina.
We all have the kill switch. It's always unfortunate too, the frozen pictures that you have, when you
am I back yet?
You're back now, yeah.
Oh my God. I hope the frozen part wasn't bad. No, I find that the characters that came to me, they just kind of came to me, and they're their own people. I mean, I studied psychology, and that's kind of what inspired me to develop their complexity, their motivations, all of that. So they're not necessarily, from the people in my life. I'm sure it bleeds in somehow, but not fully. Yeah, and it's better that way, I think. I don't even name people similar to the people in my lives, like their names, because I don't want to be like, is that me? No, it's not.
Right, start now. We're nearly at time. Dee and Trish, if you've got like something you'd like to add in a minute or so each, that would be awesome. I'm still waiting for somebody to dish dirt.
I don't have any dirt, unfortunately. I was gonna say, I have one of my daughters is transgender, and so that, as she gets older and wants to see herself represented in more media and things like that, that does tend to sometimes inform like supporting characters that I write, and she's nowhere near old enough to read my books right now. Like, that's gonna have to wait. But the book that's after the one I'm writing right now will have a female transgender, romantic protagonist, because I'm kind of, she inspires me to think forward, like in those terms, like populating my books with the people that, are
That's
already
great.
around me in my life. Sorry, I'm rambling. I know we have a very few time.
No, it's good. I love the sentiment.
That's it. That's my inspiration.
Dee, anything you'd like to add to close that?
I don't think I have any family members in my book. I did have a friend once who asked if he could be put in my book, and I said, "You realize I'm going to kill you in the book." And he was cool with that. So that happened. Yeah.
That's good. Great. Cool. Well, thanks very much. Time's really flown by. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Nice to get to know all of you a little bit. So I'm sad to say that we've got to say goodbye now. Thanks to everybody that's watching and that's been taking part on the chat as well. Thank you to all of our amazing authors and as our panelists. And so just for the audience, remember that you can go onto the QuaranCon website. You can find out more about all of our amazing authors here today in their bios. And then the convention continues. So next on the schedule is Romance as a Subplot. That's, I think, in half an hour at whatever time zone you are. That would be 5:30 for me and Pacific time. So I'd say grab a cup of tea or maybe a glass of wine, and then join the romance as a subplot, folks. But thanks very much again to all of you, and thanks to everybody who's been watching.
It's been great. Thank you.
you.
Bye.
Nice to meet everyone. Bye.
Bye.